Secretary Baker, welcome back to the show, sir.
Thank you, Chuck. Nice to be with you.
Let me start with just a simple question about Rex Tillerson. What gives you the confidence that he can make a good Secretary of State?
Well, what gives me the confidence is that I know him personally. I will have to admit to you up front, he is a friend. And yes, my law firm has done work for Exxon in the past, but I've watched Rex as he has managed that huge, big corporation for the benefit of the shareholders of the corporation, which is what he should be doing. And in my opinion, he's an excellent choice for Secretary of State and has the opportunity now to become a very, very effective one because he has the international experience, he has the managerial skills, and he's got the knowledge.
You said something this morning, sir, that you thought, hey, don't judge Rex Tillerson's relationship with Vladimir Putin beyond his time at Exxon. Do you know, does he have a different view of Putin as a civilian than as he does as CEO of Exxon?
No, of course I don't know that. I haven't talked to him since his nomination, since the president-elect indicated he was going to nominate him. And in fact, I didn't talk to the transition team about him until the Monday afternoon before he was mentioned Tuesday morning by the president-elect. So I'm not one who's been out here talking to him about all of this. I have no idea. I'm just telling you what I think.
What would your advice be to President-elect Trump, and if it is Secretary of State Tillerson, on how to handle Putin? Is this a time for closer times with Russia? What is it? What should we be doing?
Well, look, you're talking to somebody here who supports the current approach to Russia and to what Russia has done. I have not been bashful about that. I don't think that we can stand back and permit countries, if they don't like what's going on in a neighboring country, to just roll the tanks. I think that violates all norms of international behavior. So I have been a supporter of the idea of sanctions, and I will continue to be a supporter of that in terms of the national interest of the United States.
Let me go two other trips around the world here. First, I want to start with China. Donald Trump has decided to be pretty tough on China already. Some see the phone call with Taiwan as one level of provocation, and he doubled down on it himself. What do you make of it, and do you have any warnings for him on saber rattling with China?
We got a lot of things at stake with China. There are areas where we can cooperate with China. I'm thinking about North Korea. I'm thinking about trade. I'm thinking about security in the Pacific. And there are a lot of areas where we have tensions with China: the South China Sea, Taiwan, Tibet, human rights. My view is that the Obama administration has done a reasonably good job of cooperating with China where there's room for that cooperation and managing the tensions that exist in the relationship. I do know this. It is extraordinarily important that the United States and China have the best possible relationship that they can, important to both countries. And so I think that's the way I would approach this, and you need to approach it as a whole and not in discrete elements of the relationship.
And final foreign policy question for you. It has to do with Israel and the American embassy. And apparently Donald Trump is very serious about actually moving the embassy to Jerusalem. What are the upsides and downsides if he does go through with this decision?
The downsides, of course, are you also have to get along with a heck of a lot of Arab countries surrounding Israel with whom the United States has interests and relationships. And that is something that runs counter to improving those relationships or maintaining those relationships. On the other hand, It is something that is very important to the government of Israel, and they always would like to see an administration come into office and do that. So he's going to have to make the same judgments. He's going to have to sit down, listen to his advisors, and decide whether that's something he's going to do or whether it's not. Listen to the pros and cons, and there are pros and cons on both. There are arguments on both sides of that issue.
And before I let you go, I know you're very active in trying to essentially stop African elephant poaching, and this is something that you worked on when you were Secretary of State, and you're continuing to work on it. What more needs to be done, and what do you need done here by Congress and by the administration? We
need to do something about it. And what I did in 1989 and 1990 as Secretary of State is what we ought to do again, and that is push for and find a way to implement with other countries a global ban on the trade of ivory. That's the only thing that's going to stop this. We did that. We saw great progress with the herds coming back for about 8 or 10 years, and then there were some exceptions put into the ban, and we lost the progress we'd made. Today, the situation's far more dire, but we need to take that kind of action again.